right, it's February, at the end of February, as everyone knows, it is Black History Month, and we are going to celebrate it by making this video. We made this video to celebrate Black authors. It's a celebration across the nation. We are going to celebrate Black authors of genre fiction. This is pulp fiction. This is not literary. We do not celebrate literary on this channel. We only celebrate genre fiction, the pulpy stuff, the fun stuff. This is all pre-90s. It's also vintage fiction. We're going to cover them in little snippets where I talk about their background, their output, talk about the stories, and then we're going to give references too, because this was a lot of research and I grabbed a bunch of stuff from places, so we're going to acknowledge that in this video. The Paperback Warrior just put out a video 2 weeks ago called Black Detectives that is very similar to this, so I avoided overlapping. So, for more, even more Black authors, Black characters, go check out their video, their podcast episode. It is wonderful. I only overlap on one, I believe, and that is Chester Himes. So instead of doing the full Chester Himes background, I decided that I would do it the short bio and then review this here, all shot up. Coffin Ed and Gravedigger Jones. This is a 1960 crime novel, and it is awesome. So this will be reviewed at the very end of this video. So I try to grab authors of all different genres of genre fiction. We got sci-fi covered, we've got sword and sorcery covered, we've got some horror, and we got some men's adventure and some action and some crime. We do not have any westerns. I couldn't really find a Black writer for westerns. I didn't look very hard, to tell you the truth. I'm sure there is some, but yeah, so there's no westerns, but all the other genre fiction is covered. There are two very important authors missing from this video: Iceberg Slim and Donald Goines. The reason that I left them off this video is I plan on doing an all Holloway House video. Holloway House was the publisher of those books, of their books, and they publish lots of Black authors. So I'm going to do a very specific Holloway House video in the future. So I did leave them off of this one, so I wasn't rehashing it there. But if you want to know a little bit more about Donald Goines, I did review his book, Crime Partners. And it is right there, if you want to click on that. And it has a little background on Donald Goines and a glaring review of his awesome book. So we are going to start off right here with Charles Saunders. Ingo. Charles R. Saunders was born in 1946 in Pennsylvania and died in Nova Scotia, Canada in 2020. He graduated from Lincoln University in 1968 with a degree in psychology. In 1969, he was drafted to fight in Vietnam, but instead relocated to Canada. Saunders is most well known for his character Imaro, a warrior of the plains of Nyumbani, a fictional version of Africa. Imaro is often compared to Conan, and Saunders has said how he was influenced by Robert E. Howard, but Imaro was also a reaction to Edgar Rice Burroughs' Tarzan character. Saunders said in an interview published in the journal Black American Literature Forum, published by Johns Hopkins University Press, "I think he was born when I watched a Tarzan movie and fantasized a black man jumping up and beating the hell out of Johnny Weissmuller." Imaro was first published as short stories in Gene Day's fanzine Dark Fantasy. The first Imaro story was reprinted in Dahl Books' first Year's Best Fantasy Stories, edited by Lynn Carter. Dahl owner Donald A. Walheim then encouraged Saunders to put together the short stories in a fix-up that would become the first Imaro novel. There were 5 entries in the Imaro series, the first 3 published by Dahl in the early to mid-80s, and then he brought the character back in 2009 for 1 novel and another in 2017. The Imaro series is steeped in African locations, history, people, folklore, and tribes, each with slight adjustments to add to the fantastical fictional world of Nyumbani. Unlike other characters and racial themes in this video, and Marl's struggle is a personal one. Another of Saunders' popular characters was Dosai, a female warrior that appeared in a short story anthology called Amazons in 1979. Dosai was based on the Dahomey Amazons, which were an all-female military regiment that protected the West African kingdom of Dahomey from the 17th century until the late 19th century. 3 more stories followed in Marion Zimmer Bradley's Sword and Sorceress anthologies. In 1986, Saunders wrote the script for the movie Amazons, based off the Dosai stories, but in the movie the warriors were all blonde white ladies, so yeah, loose adaptation. In 2008, he resurrected the character with a fix-up novel of the previous stories and a completely new novel in 2012. Saunders also wrote a few non-fiction books centered around his home in Nova Scotia, Canada. One that piqued my interest was the book called Sweat and Soul, the saga of black boxers from the Halifax Forum to Caesar's Palace, released in 1990. And while doing the research for this, I stumbled upon another boxing-related Saunders authored book, Damballa from 2011, which is a black vigilante pulp-style hero. It's 1938 in Harlem, and there's a heavyweight championship fight between the U.S. champion and a German challenger. Saunders based the fight off of one of the most important fights in boxing history, which was the rematch of the Joe Louis-Max Schmeling fight. In this book, the Nazis are rigging the match for their guy to win, but Damballa has figured it out and set to put a stop to it. Our references for this research were the New York Times article by Neil Genslinger, Blackgate.com, Airship27.com, and I learned of Charles R. Saunders from our fellow YouTube posters, Tim at Secret Fire Books and David Books and Comics. Go follow both of them. Octavia E. Butler was born in 1947 and died in 2006. She grew up in Pasadena, California, and attended the Pasadena City College, and then later would take writing classes through the UCLA, and once attended a Writers Guild of America West workshop taught by Harlan Ellison, who encouraged her to attend the 6-week Clarion Science Fiction Writers Workshop. Her first story was published in 1971 for the Clarion Workshop, and she sold another for Harlan Ellison's anthology, The Last Dangerous Visions, which was not published until 2024. In the mid-1980s, she won Hugo and Nebula Awards for her body horror novelette Bloodchild. She published 14 novels, including the Patternist series about a secret history continuing from the ancient Egyptian period to the far future that involves telepathic mind control and an extraterrestrial plague. Lilith's Brood series, a post-nuclear war has all but destroyed humanity, and an alien race comes in to save the survivors. But in order to do that, the humans must mix their genetic makeup and become hybrids like the aliens, losing their humanity. She also wrote the Parable series and 2 standalones. Our references for Octavia Butler research are JessNevins.com and, unfortunately, Wikipedia. Stephen Barnes. Born in 1952 in Los Angeles, California, and he is still alive. He actually has a decent online presence where he is happy to chat about his writing, teaching the craft, and isn't averse to interviews. His first published piece of fiction was a 1979 collaboration with Larry Niven called The Locust, which was a Hugo nominee. Along with author wife Tanana Reeve Dew, they teach a course at UCLA called The Sunken Place, Racism, Survival, and Black Horror Aesthetic. His latest book was a Star Wars novel titled Mace Windu, The Glass Abyss, released in 2024. Stephen Barnes started out writing a science fiction series with Larry Niven called Dream Park, which had 4 entries from 1981 to 2011. Dream Park is an amusement park set in 2051. In the park, people can become characters in a live-action role-playing game, similar to Dungeons & Dragons, but you are essentially in a virtual reality. The story morphs into cyberpunk territory, where the games are cutting-edge technology, morphed into televised games, and real murder and corruption going on in the background. This book inspired fans to create real-world LARPing games based on the concepts. His next series is the Aubrey Knight series, which has 3 entries from 1983 to 1993. It takes place in a futuristic Los Angeles, where ex-cartel thug Aubrey Knight has left the gang to try and achieve his goals of being the Null Boxing World Champion. Null Boxing is a mixed form of martial arts similar to MMA. The cartel sets him up for murder, and Aubrey is sent to the Death Valley Maximum Security Penitentiary. There he kicks ass and fights for survival and freedom to enact his revenge on those who have wronged him. From a 2003 interview in Locus magazine, Stephen Barnes said, "When I wrote Street Lethal with a black guy and they put a white guy on the cover, my editor at the time was utterly mortified. Her editor-in-chief told me it was an art department decision, and the art department said it was marketing, and the marketing department said the truck drivers who put the books on stands would think it was some kind of get whitey, shaft in space thing and refuse to handle it. No one would take responsibility. That's happened to tons of writers, black and white. Publishers wouldn't put a black character on the cover, especially not a man. For Octavia E. Butler, I remember clearly when they would change her character's race and put green people on the cover, but not black people." Barnes has written over 30 novels and some screenplays for television, including the reboot Outer Limits and Twilight Zone. He's written for Stargate SG-1, Andromeda, and Baywatch. And Barnes doesn't just write about kicking ass. He has many degrees in the martial arts, including a black belt in Kempo Karate and Kodokan Judo, a brown belt in Shojin Jiu-Jitsu, and lower belts in Taekwondo and Aikido. He is an instructor in Wu Ming Ta, Wu-style Tai Chi, and Filipino Kalit stick and knife fighting. He also enjoys self-defense pistol shooting and Junfan kickboxing. And when he's done kicking your ass, he can help you find your center again, as he's a Hatha yoga instructor. Our references for Mr. Barnes' research are michaelaventrella.com, which was the interview with Stephen Barnes, Darkush, Stephen Barnes' blog, apexbookcompany.com, which is another interview, and Wikipedia and Goodreads for plot synopsis. Joseph Nazel, born in 1944 and died from brain cancer at the age of 62 in 2006. He joined the Air Force in 1964 and went to fight in the Vietnam War, getting himself shot in the neck. Throughout the years, he would proudly display the bullet scar. He lived in LA and Watts, the Crenshaw District, and Inglewood. Joe wrote over 60 novels, mostly put out by Holloway House, whom he was also an editor for. He was also the editor of Players Magazine, a nudie magazine featuring black ladies, which was the first of its kind. He was a follower of the ideologies of Martin Luther King Jr., more so than the militant aspects of 60s black activism, and would often write it in his stories. Joseph Nazel wrote a few series characters, one of them being Black Cop, under the pseudonym Dom Grober. Black Cop had 4 entries from 1974 to 1976, and stars a Vietnam veteran named James Rhodes, who works for the LAPD Narcotics Division. The series seems to be a basic police procedural, but with a black lead who has to not only deal with nefarious crime lords, but racism within the department and out on the streets. Another series character is Iceman, who is a total men's adventure series about a pimp secret agent named Henry Highland West. In his entourage are ass-kicking, smoking hot lady sidekicks. In pulp hero staple style, he is uber rich, owns a $1 million pleasure haven called the Oasis, and with his own personal helicopter travels the world annihilating evildoers, including the usual suspects of the Syndicate, South African slavers, and a Canadian extremist group, among others. He also wrote a lot of unauthorized biographies, including Richard Pryor, B.B. King, poet Langston Hughes, and Paul Robeson, a professional football player, actor, and singer. It was difficult to find many black horror authors from the pre-90s era, but Nazel was a name that kept popping up, mostly for the infamous Black Exorcist novel. The Black Exorcist was published in 1974 and then republished in 1983 as Satan's Master. It is about a Christian reverend and a satanic voodoo priest battling it out for the people in the black community. It has lots of racial politics of the time, bumping heads on whether the best path is violence or love. But it also delivers in the horror aspects. You get zombies, mafia, voodoo, Satan, crime, sex, cults, possession, and just plain old good versus evil. Our references for Joe Nazel were Paperback Warrior blog, LA Times article by Emery Holmes, JethroWegener.com, and JessNevins.com. Marc Olden was born in 1933 in Baltimore and died in 2003 in New York. He graduated from Queens College with a degree in creative writing and history. He had an affinity for Japanese culture and thus trained in martial arts, earned advanced degree black belts in karate and aikido. His first published works were 2 non-fiction books. One is a biography of Black Panther political activist Angela Davis, and the other a study on cocaine in 1970s New York. Through his investigative work, he was introduced to many real-world DEA and CIA agents, which led him to his first fiction series, Narc. Narc was written under the pseudonym Robert Hawks and was a 9-book series which lasted from 1973 to 1975. It was a men's adventure crime series about a white narcotics agent named John Bolt, who kicks ass, gets ladies, and takes on drug dealers. The books of his that I was most aware of before doing this article was the Black Samurai series. This time penned under his own name and with a black protagonist hero named Robert Sand, who is an American GI stationed in Japan. He gets shot while trying to stop some baddies from attacking an old man, but it turns out that the old man was a samurai master who kicks the shit out of the assailants as Sand is passed out. Sand goes under his wing for samurai training, and within 7 years, he is a force of nature, and also the first black man to ever take the oath of the samurai. The Black Samurai series had 8 entries from 1974 to 1975, and was even made into a movie starring Jim Kelly.
Jim Kelly, Agent for Dragon. Codename Black Samurai. On land, on sea, in the air, in action. Jim Kelly is the Black Samurai, the incredible secret agent for Dragon. And half the world's out to kill him. Jim Kelly as the Black Samurai. No matter what the odds, they haven't got a chance against him. From Hong Kong to Haiti, come the men and women who play the dangerous game of voodoo and violence. Jennacott the Warlock.
It's better to reign in hell than serve in heaven.
Toki, bait for the trap. Chavez, pain is his pleasure. Bone, the crusher. Sin, lovely to look at.
I like to think of you as my white knight. Come to my rescue.
Never the white knight, baby. Murderous to know. They dance for him. They desire him. They die for him. Pines, which side is he really on? Black Samurai is coming your way. Jim Kelly, heading for action.
In 1976, he started his Harker series about an investigative journalist named Harker who takes on corruption and crime. The series only had 4 entries lasting from 1976 to 1978. He also had 17 standalone novels, many influenced by his love of Japanese culture. He would venture into other genres such as horror with The Book of Shadows and Poe Must Die. References for Marc Olden are marcolden.com, thepaperbackwarrior.com, and on YouTube we learned a lot from David Books and Comics. Glenda Dumas. Like I said, I had a hard time finding black horror authors from before the 90s, which is mind-blowing because the post-Stephen King explosion had every writer hacking out their bloated horror novel, so just by sheer numbers, you would figure there would be some black authors. Maybe there is, and I just couldn't find them. I don't know. I did find this very interesting Glenda Dumas book titled The Root Worker. Along with Joseph Navel's Black Exorcist, these seem to be 2 of the few horror novels published by Holloway House. I intend to make a whole video on Holloway House and was going to save this entry for that, but we need the horror genre represented here, so I'll go ahead and mention it now. There isn't a lot of information about Glenda Dumas, but I believe she is still alive. She put out a book called Visions of the Rapture, an Unseen Realm in 2016, which according to her Author's Den profile is a book that describes how the Lord chose me to give an important message to His people. I was transported into the future and showed the rapture by an archangel. I believe he was Michael, because he was extremely huge and Michael appears to have a major role in the end times. He did, however, show me how the rapture will happen and let me know that most people are not ready to go up. This is a message that I need to get out. As for her 1983 novel, The Root Worker, according to the back synopsis, it appears to be about a young woman falling in love with a man and her bringing him back to her small town in North Carolina, where everyone in town, including her parents, are in a secret cult that worships Satan called the Cult of the Root Worker. There aren't any reviews of this book online, so it looks like I'm going to have to pick up this book and rectify that. Alright, thank you for staying tuned for all that. To all you that stuck around, I really appreciate it. So last up here, we're going to cover this Chester Himes book, All Shut Up, from 1960, put out by Berkeley Medallion. And just real quick, here's a short bio of Mr. Himes. Chester Himes was born in Missouri in 1909 and died in Spain in 1984. He grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and later went to the Ohio State University in Columbus. He was expelled for playing a prank, and a couple years later was arrested for armed robbery and sentenced to 20 to 25 years of hard labor at the Ohio Penitentiary. In prison, he started writing. His first published story was in 1931. In 1936, he was paroled. He worked as a screenwriter in LA, but was pushed out because of his race. In the 1950s, he moved to France, and then in 1969, he moved to Spain, where he died from Parkinson's disease at the age of 75. He wrote some literary type of novels on his own experiences and issues relating to race and his time in prison, but he is mostly known for his hard-boiled crime detective series featuring two black detectives operating in Harlem by the names of Coffin Ed Johnson and Gravedigger Jones. There were 8 entries in the series from 1957 to 1969. All Shot Up was the 4th book in this series. Alright, the basic premise. In 1950s Harlem, a sailor and his girlfriend try and recover their stolen Cadillac while 2 detectives try and figure out who, how, and why 3 men dressed as police robbed an up-and-coming politician and left a trail of bodies along the way. It's a freezing cold Groundhog's Day on the city streets of Harlem, New York. A man stealing a tire witnesses a giant golden Cadillac run over a lady trying to walk across the street. The car is driven by a big man wearing a coonskin cap, a tiny little pimp-looking guy, and a woman that he thinks that he recognizes. They drive off in a hurry, and the poor woman that they've hit rises to the ground. She's okay, but only for a second, because an unmarked police car comes barreling down the street and plows into her again, killing her for real this time. The cops catch up with the Cadillac, they pull them all out, they smack the little pimp guy with the blackjack, and then they steal the Cadillac. The man in the coonskin hat is Roman. He's a hardy sailor who saved up all of his sailor money to buy this gold Cadillac, and he'll be goddamned if anyone, even the police, think they're gonna get away with stealing that car. So he and his girlfriend Sassafras grab their unconscious friend, jump into the abandoned police car, and take off after him. Back at the police station, the phone is ringing off the hook. There's been a shootout outside of this gay bar, and this local prominent figure is involved. The case is then given to the 2 black detectives at the precinct, Coffin Ed Johnson and Gravedigger Jones. This book starts up right away and never lets up. It's pulpy and hard-boiled with lots of dark humor. Random events occur that you think are just for comic relief, and then it wraps back around and weighs in on the plot. An example, the thief stealing the car witnesses the woman get hit. She's laying in the ground, and he's like, well, I already got the wheel off the car. I might as well finish the job even though I just witnessed this murder. He gets the wheel off. He's rolling it down the street because he's in a hurry. It gets away from him. It rolls down the street and barrels into 2 cops. He takes off running. Later on, while Coffin Ed and Gravedigger Jones are investigating this, looking for witnesses, it turns out that these 2 cops never reported this because they were too embarrassed by it. And that's what stood out about this whole thing, is that he made this little tiny event matter, and that's what made it notable. Back at the gay bar, inside from where the shooting had happened, Coffin Ed and Gravedigger Jones go inside to interview some witnesses. Obviously no one wants to talk, so they line them all up. And then they go through and they just start smacking the shit out of every one of them until someone starts talking. Eventually the bartender speaks up. There was 3 lone gunmen and they had a shootout with a mystery man. One of the dead men outside was a drag queen named Snake Hips. The mystery gunman was a private detective, and the man stabbed in the street was a local prominent businessman, up-and-coming politician named Casper Holmes, who has an office above the gay bar, who may sometimes frequent the gay bar. He was carrying a satchel of money. How did the hoods know? Was this all random? The main characters, Coffin Ed Johnson and Gravedigger Jones, who aside from having the greatest character names in any book I've ever read, they reminded me of Denzel Washington's character in Training Day. They're violent and reckless, doing whatever needs to be done to get answers. But unlike Washington's character, they aren't crooked. They aren't doing it for their own monetary purposes. They're doing it because that's what's right, and that's what needs to be done to get the job done. All of the people in Harlem refer to them as the man. They are of the people, but separate. The other cops on the scene refer to them as cowboys. They are 2 big dogs that make everyone around them tense up when they are around. They are hard, ex-military guys from the streets driving around Harlem in an ice storm at 3 a.m. drinking a bottle of bourbon, solving mystery cases. There is lots of brutality in this. We love brutality. A man is decapitated in gory detail while driving a motorcycle in a police chase. Sheet metal comes through, chops his head off. But there's also humor because his body just keeps rolling down the street headless on this motorcycle. Simultaneously across town, while having a conversation about the man, Sassafras assures Roman that he's cool under pressure and doesn't lose his head. The characters are pulpy, colorful, with lots of great street names like Sassafras, Snake Hips, and Black Beauty, not to mention the main character's ghoulish nicknames of Coffin Ed and Gravedigger Jones. Little Pimp Guy Baron is described in a manner that it was hard not to picture Cat Williams. Casper the politician is slimy and crooked, making all kinds of backhanded deals in his quest for power, and Roman the sailor is a simple straight man surrounded by crooks, but even he stands out as a brute not to mess with. I was very surprised while reading this that this came out in 1960. If I had to guess, I would say this was definitely from the 70s, the blaxploitation movie era. It was very ahead of its time. There were only a few remarks on racism. The N-word shows up only 3 times. The first by a white cop, and then again by the same character until Coffin Ed threateningly says, "Say it one more time," and dude instantly shuts his mouth. Some interesting points of language here that I wanted to point out. Instead of motherfucker, they say mother raper, which is 100 times worse. Mother raper is incredibly wrong. Like they couldn't put the word fuck in this book back then. So instead they replaced it with rape, which was somehow like more socially acceptable. I don't know. It's just so crazy how words change and like what's offensive and what's not. When you stop and really think about the 2 words, what's worse? So this is one hell of a great crime book. The setting is dangerous. It's got the frozen weather, just making it even more bleak, and it's well thought out, and the strands all tie up nicely at the end. You root for the main characters, but in real life, you would not want to run into these guys. They are terrifying, and that is how I like my heroes. So yeah, great book. 2 thumbs up, 10 thumbs up, 12. Go check out these authors. Go check out these books. If you know other authors that I didn't mention, put them in the comments. You can leave Samuel R. Delany off though. Don't even talk about him. But all the other ones, let me know. I want to know other black authors. I'm out of here.